Welcome to Being Patient Brain Talks. I'm Deborah Kan, founder of Being Patient. Today, we are going to talk to the producers of a film that is currently on Amazon Prime Video. I just finished watching the series. It's called No Country for Old People, and it's really a deep dive into the state of care facilities in America today. Joining me is Susie Singer Carter. The films feature her mom's story in a five-star facility in Los Angeles, and her co-producer, Rick Mountcastle. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you.
Excited to talk to you.
So, Susie, I was just saying before we started the live, it was it's a three-part episode series, and through the entire episodes, I just felt my heart was just breaking through the whole thing. It's a hard topic to talk about, but I really feel a necessary one. Before we delve into the details, tell me a little bit about your mom.
Oh, well, my mom was what I call a bona fide pistol, and just an incredible force, and had this most amazing singing voice, and just sort of entered each room with a joie de vivre that people just couldn't help but notice, and just a great person. I just one of my favorite people. In.
She was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. How old was she when she was diagnosed?
She was diagnosed when she was 72, but we're pretty sure that she started getting symptoms when in her late 60s. So we didn't know anything about Alzheimer's until she got the diagnosis of mild cognitive deficiency, or yeah.
Which is a very familiar story. It's always mild cognitive impairment.
Yeah.
You get the Alzheimer's diagnosis. So your mom was, she didn't go directly into a home. It was really a lot later in the journey that she was in a care facility. Tell me a little bit about how she first entered.
Right. So my mom was, living at home and with my stepdad, who was 12 years older. So she had, I think together his cognitively, he was perfect, but he was physically sort of, hard of hearing, wasn't walking too well. So she was the eyes and ears, and he was the memory. So they made almost a perfect person, and they got along really well, and they were each other's best friend. And then when Georgie, his name, passed away, my mom was going through, I'm sure you're familiar with Groundhog's Day and that feeling of like, where's George? He passed away. What? Why didn't anybody tell me? Mom, you were there. Oh, so I just decided that she needed to move in with me until we could get her acclimated to this new life. And it was, and I didn't know anything about Alzheimer's. There wasn't a lot of resources, when I was first trying to tackle this. There really wasn't. There's so much more resources now, but there just wasn't. And there was also such a big stigma. There still is, but it was even more, because I think families were more inclined to try to protect the person with Alzheimer's, because it wasn't viewed as like a disease, but more of like a deficiency
Yeah,
that they could help with, that they could remember if they just tried.
So I want to kind of get to the heart of the issue here. It's which you so eloquently take us through your journey. I really feel like I was kind of living it with you, because you've chronicled so much of her experience in this care facility, which you keep referring to as a five-star,
Yes.
certified five-star by CMS, which is the Center for Medicare and Medicaid in the US, which means it's top quality, right? The best of the best.
Right.
But that's not exactly what you found.
No. So this all came out of COVID, is when I started to notice that my mom was declining quickly. And that was because we were kept from seeing our loved ones, as like most people were during that time. And I only got to see her on FaceTime or FaceTime or Zoom like once a week. And I kept seeing her progressively get worse and worse. And, at this point she was immobile, but in a wheelchair. She wasn't bedridden. She was very active and like she was very social but suddenly she was like she was disappearing before my eyes. She was in bed at 3 in the afternoon when we were Zooming and was not dressed. And I would say, what's going on? Why isn't she out of bed? Oh, I don't know. We don't know, and then in hindsight, realizing that almost everybody was isolated in their rooms during that time. And so, failure to thrive was a big issue during COVID. But that's when I started to see that this 5-star facility was not really a 5-star facility because the system is based on a business model that relies on understaffing. And so during COVID, because they were already so understaffed, it was, when any staff member tested positive and had to quarantine for 2 weeks, now you have less staff. And I'm talking about like every day we got, messages, 13 staff members tested positive for COVID. And like, how, like, who's taking care of them?
Yeah. And what you bring up a lot too is like the severe shortages anyway, like to forget COVID, right?
Right.
There's these care facilities are incredibly short staffed. I want to bring Rick into the conversation and then we'll come back to some of your experiences with your mom. But Rick, you are a former federal prosecutor. You're known for leading the prosecution against the OxyContin maker, Purdue Pharma. Where's the connection here with Susie? When did you get involved in this and how?
It's a series of unforeseen events, basically. At the last episode of Dope Sick, which is in part about the case that I prosecuted, there's a mention of the next case that we did, which was Abbott Labs, which had been off-label marketing an epilepsy drug as basically a chemical restraint for dementia patients in nursing homes. And so that was the next case. It was mentioned in Dope Sick. Susie watched Dope Sick and the Depakote case, that was the drug, the Abbott Labs Depakote case also resonated with her because her mother had been placed on Depakote, which and had resulted in her becoming immobile and incontinent, and it had happened without Susie's knowledge. And so she wanted me to come on her podcast as a result to talk about not about Dope Sick, but about Abbott Labs and Depakote. And so that's how we first connected. And during the course of that conversation, Susie asked a very hard question because I was explaining to her that the system was broken. It wasn't just individual people. It wasn't the staff, the workers who try their best, but they can't do what they have to do. It wasn't them. It was a system that allowed these companies to run these nursing homes for profit over care, and that the model that they used was to cut costs by understaffing. And so she asked the hard question, well, how do we change that? Right? What can we do to change it? And then she started experiencing some really the bad stuff that happened to her mother that you see on No Country for Old People. And she and I would talk, and we talked about what she was going through, why it was happening. And at the end, after her mother passed in July of that year, we were just talking about how do we change the system? It's horrible. It's happening not just to her mother, but to a lot of people. And that's how we came up with the idea of No Country for Old People.
So Susie, one thing I was struck by was the amount of video you had chronicling all of this journey in the last 6 months of her life, from, the care or lack of care she was getting. You have all of the text messages with doctors and everything. So in your mind, when you were going through this, were you thinking, I'm going to make a film out of this? This is just like, what were you thinking?
I was just memorializing my mom for, future. Like the whole thing of me telling her life story in the beginning, right? That was just
Yeah.
my partner, my other partner, other co-producer, Dawn, who loved my mom. And we were just, he just said, you know what, I just filmed 12 minutes of that because it was so adorable. And that became the thread of the film. Now, and then later when Rick and I decided to do it, he said, you need to start, you know, chronicling stuff with video. And so some of the stuff that you saw that where I had to hide my camera because they stopped letting me take photos of my mom, period. Even though
So
that, yeah, that's against the rules, but they kept telling me that I wasn't allowed to.
I want to give the audience a little bit of context, and we will post the link to No Country for Old People. It is you live this journey with Susie through these episodes. The things that stand out the most in my mind is your poor mom was in this room. It was boiling hot. There was heat waves, and there was a heat wave going on, and no air con, and you set up fans coming from
Yeah,
all angles.
yeah.
That just broke my heart. Like to see an older person so uncomfortable, but she couldn't really express herself. She couldn't say, "I'm so damn hot,"
I'm
but you
so
see
right.
it,
She would have said,
feel
"Get
it.
me the hell out of here. I'm
Yeah.
sweating to death." And it was just the, as we go through all of the things that everybody experiences, when you're going through, neglect and abuse in these facilities. It's the same cycle. It's gaslighting, it's retaliation. I got so much gaslighting. It was like, well, we're gonna, my mom didn't need to be in that corridor where she was, but they just decided it was easier to just keep her there because that was the only corridor that didn't have air conditioning. And so I was like, can we move her? No, we actually can't. What do you mean you can't move her? Well, then can we get it fixed? I mean, what's going on? So but then, looking back and after doing so much research, this is just ritual. This is what goes on.
And the most harrowing, of course, was that like all along they're trying to push your mom towards death.
Yeah.
And first you thought, oh, it might be time, but then you realized, wait, she's not ready to go yet. She still
Right.
wants to eat and drink. And then she's not, she was intubated and fed through a tube, and then they wouldn't let you feed her or give her, like she was so clearly visibly thirsty and parched. So talk me through a little bit of that. Like I just can't believe that they would not let you feed or your mom. I mean, I can't believe it. It's almost like the medical system wanted her to die,
Well,
and she didn't want it
they
to die.
did. They did. I mean, looking back at it, they did. And I felt it at the time. I was like, because the hospice doctor said she's going to succumb. She had this, pressure sore and they wouldn't call in a wound doctor. And she said, well, because she's going to succumb to it anyway. And I said, well, she's going to succumb. You would succumb too if we don't get a doctor. And I mean, anybody would. That's ridiculous. But then, when I kept saying they put her on NPO, which is nothing by mouth, saying that she was going to get aspiration pneumonia, meaning that you would breathe in the food or the water, or whatever, and it would go into your lungs. Well, you saw by all the experts that we had on that that's just ridiculous. And you actually have more of a chance of aspirating when you have a feeding tube. And my mom was clearly wanting to eat. That was her life, and you could see me like they finally let me give her some liquids by a sponge where they so her dignity was out the door. Like she had to suck on a sponge only by me, like no one else would do it. And the thing is, it's so sad because my very dear friend, the same scenario just happened to her cousin who was only in his 70s. He just passed away 2 weeks ago. They put him on NPO. They gave him a feeding tube. And she had already watched my documentary. They were like, what is going on? He's not ready to die. Like this guy wants to eat. He wants to leave. They literally refused to feed him and he
So
died.
Okay, so Rick, you've done investigations into obviously pharma and others. What's going on with our healthcare system here where the elderly are so diminished and it's almost like they have no more rights? This is happening. It's happened in Susie's case. I know it's happening a lot more. What's going on with the system? Why is it so broken?
Well, the system is set up um, as a profit-making model, and it favors the businesses, the owners, and the companies and the corporations that are in ownership positions, and it allows them to set their business structure that maximizes the profit at the expense of taking care of people. I also prosecuted nursing homes and nursing home operators. And I saw sort of the crossover between prosecuting an opioid manufacturer, where the victims of that were people that got addicted. So you're talking about addicts, which basically are voiceless, right? They've stigmatized, and who's going to believe someone who's addicted to an opioid, right? And they also exploit people with dementia or Alzheimer's, and who's going to believe them? And who's so it's to me it's the system is set up to allow the exploitation for profit of the voiceless. Okay, and the system allows those exploiters to maximize that exploitation with very little consequence, if any, very little risk of being held accountable. And so that's kind of what we want people to wake up. And so No Country for Old People is meant to go to people who don't know about it, because any of us who have dealt with it, people like Susie and other family members, they know, okay, because they've had to live it. Everybody else also needs to know, because at some point in your life, you are likely to either need that kind of care, have a family member who needs it, or be a caregiver for somebody who needs it. So we want to make people aware of this system that exploits the voiceless. We want to give voice to the voiceless, and we want the public to know what's going on. So that's kind of our sort of overall mission. And I think people should also think about all of the residents, Alzheimer's patients, residents in nursing homes who don't have a family member like Susie to come in and try to advocate for them. There are many people sitting in nursing homes now who have nobody to give them voice and nobody to advocate for them. And we as a public need to know about that, and we need to do something about it.
Right.
So, yeah, go ahead, Susie. I'm actually just queuing up part of this because I think we should share some of it with our audience. But go ahead. What
I
did
was
you?
just going to say that, the ageism and which, and also the ableism about, and the misunderstanding of people with cognitive disability and, like Parkinson's and all kinds of dementias. There's this, overall idea that they're not there. They're not, it doesn't matter. And if that were true, then what are you doing? You're warehousing them? Because if that's true, if they're not there, but you're just keeping them alive, then you're warehousing them, right? Because, you're not giving them a quality life. So you're just keeping them alive so that you can bill against them. So that's the problem. I mean, I if you saw in the documentary when the chaplain came in and told me that don't worry about your mom because she's demented and she has holes in her brain.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
was like, oh my gosh, because you have holes in your brain. You don't
I
get
mean,
it.
it does make you think of how did we get this way? Like I was saying this earlier, I spent a lot of my life in Asia, and you have an obligation in Asian culture to take care of the elderly, right? There's an obligation in society to give the elderly respect and the best care. I feel like something's gone terribly wrong here where the families like yourself may feel very true to that, but the system is so badly failing.
But it's
Uh,
also people, Deborah, because I don't know, you saw that I did a short film called My Mom and the Girl about my mom, a day in the life of Alzheimer's. And I made it was supposed,
Yes.
a joyous look at it. And I brought up the fact that when I brought my mom into my home and I had my teenage daughter, everybody around me said, "Oh my God, why would you do that? Why would you bring your mom in with your daughter? That's not fair." And it was like, what do you mean it's not fair? And then I thought, is it not fair? But this is the mindset that we have, is that real life, anything that's difficult is not appropriate. Like, we don't need to look at it. So because it's difficult. And at the end of that year that my mom lived with us, which was difficult, it was the best and worst year of our life. My daughter said, "We're not ready for Nanny to go." And so that told me I did the right thing.
Absolutely. Okay, I want to just share a little piece of this. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, let's just share a quick segment of this.
It's freaking hot in here.
Sorry, I don't see it.
90,
you guys seeing the screen?
94 degrees out,
It's
and
going.
there's no.
I'm not seeing it for some reason.
I'm not seeing anything.
Let me refresh. Hold on. Give me one sec. Sorry about this. I it went away. Sorry. Wait, let me take you off. Let's talk and I'll get it back up. It was working perfectly and now Prime decided to yeah, Prime for some reason is. So tell me, let's tell people though the complete story. So it was 6 months of hell basically in hospice, right? Hospice, and I think you made this point. You didn't really know what hospice was before,
No.
but you found out quickly. Tell me a little bit about that journey through hospice, and those 6 months, and what did you learn?
Well, so my mom had gone in and out of the hospital because of this wound that she had, which is a pressure wound, and a pressure wound, which I didn't even knew what a pressure wound. This is all like learning as I go. Is emblematic. It is the hallmark of neglect, because according to CMS, it is a never event. But I didn't know that at the time, because they were telling me, "Oh, you can't avoid it. This is what happens when people get to a certain age. They get, bed sores."
Facility actually told you it didn't happen there,
Oh yeah.
right?
Yeah. When
They,
she was
they
first taken to
denied
the
that.
hospital, nobody wants to take
Yeah.
responsibility for it. So the hospital called me and said, "Your mom was just admitted here with a stage 4
Stage 4.
bed sore, and sepsis and pneumonia and 10% kidney function." And they wanted to make sure that I knew that it didn't happen there. So when I called the facility and said, "How come no one told me that my mom had such an advanced bed sore?" And they said, "Oh, it didn't happen here." So it happened somewhere between the ambulance drive from there to the hospital.
And
I
and
can't.
I don't know if you or your audience knows how horrific a stage 4 pressure ulcer bed sore is.
It's
Stage
an
4
open
means
festering wound, right?
all the way to the bone is stage 4. Okay, it is. The words don't really mean anything, until you've seen it. I've seen pictures of it before, and then Susie's now seen it. It is the most horrible thing you can imagine.
Yeah.
Okay, just so just so that's clear.
Right. Because I didn't know, when they say bed sore, you think, honestly, we don't know. We're not taught these things. So I thought, oh, it's like when you cross your legs too long and you have like a red mark and it's like, ow, that hurts. I did not know. I feel, how egregious it was.
It,
But yeah, go on.
I mean, the thing that kept coming to me too is that you weren't allowed, what was the point of them keeping you out of the room when they were like changing her or turning her? I mean, I don't know how you could justify that, saying you can't be in the room, because other than it's really so bad that we don't want you to see it, right?
100%. Yeah, because I kept talking to the administration like I knew they were understaffed. This is before Rick even told me that we were understaffed. This is like I knew that because the CNAs were telling me, "Can you help me hold your mom up?" Right? And I was like, "Okay," because I knew that there was supposed to be 2 people in there. And I went to the administration. I said, "I know that you're understaffed, so what can we do about it? I mean, what can I do to help?" And the administrator said, we're not understaffed. We're absolutely not understaffed." And I said, "But your employees are saying that, like, one employee told me that they had to hurry up because they left a resident on the toilet, and a man. So she was, juggling between residents. I mean, and it's so unfair to the frontline providers. They can't do their job. So they feel horrible. They have moral injury, as you saw that we talk about the moral injury, which is devastating. It's devastating.
And I guess the one thing that's important to point out is there are a lot of good intention people who are working within the healthcare system. There's some probably who aren't that good that you point out, but there are really good people there. The system, though, is they're number one, and number two, there's just not enough. And so as much as some of the really well-intended people want to do their jobs in the best way, they actually can't because they're just so short-staffed, right?
Right. They're short-staffed. So you've got somebody that should only be dealing with, maybe 8 people in an 8-hour shift, and they've got 15, sometimes 30 people. And, this whole week there's been so much news about CMS's, basically rescinding the minimum staffing proposition. And so, which is going to be the result in so much horror. It's already horrible. And then now it's going to be like they've got free reign because they don't have to do it. They don't have to have minimum. Rick, I see you.
Yeah, can I say one thing, Deborah?
Yes.
I want to make it clear that we in no way blame the frontline workers.
All
we
right.
actually feel bad for them because they are working under conditions that they shouldn't be working under. They're overworked and underpaid. And that's because of the business model. That's because of the system. So I want to make that clear that we really respect the frontline workers tremendously, and we want to help them get proper pay and proper support and help in staffing.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's why that you asked me why I wasn't allowed in the room was because I was, reporting to the admin, like what was going on. And so they were like, they were at that point, we don't want to hear from her anymore. So just keep her out of the room because, right.
Right. So then that becomes very clear. Okay. I'm going to share now.
Okay.
See, I don't know why my Prime is acting so weird. Hold on. Every time I try to share, I'm not seeing it. Hold on. Let me go back.
Wrapped in the grip.
I can hear you, but we're not seeing it, are we? All right.
No.
Sorry, I'm failing miserably at this. We're gonna
You'll have to go to Amazon, everybody, and watch it.
Have to watch it yourself. I really tried. I have no idea.
Please watch it.
Every single time I try to the screen goes off. I have no idea. Sorry about that, guys. We will link to the on Amazon. It's really worth it. Please rent it or buy it. It's really worth it. It's an eye opener. It's something that all of us should be aware of. But I want to end on what can we do to change the system? Because I have to admit, like, yes, making documentaries such as yours is a step in the right direction. But what do the rest of us do? Like, how can we change this system? Or are we just really held hostage to it?
Well, I mean, if we don't do anything, we definitely are held hostage. So we have a lobby there's a nursing home lobby that's very powerful that has been making their business to keep everything status quo. And they have seats in the legislature, and they line the pockets of our politicians, and with millions of dollars for their campaigns. So, we don't have that kind of money as the constituency, but what we do have is power as a constituency. So we're launched a movement called ROAR, which is Respect, Oversight, Advocacy, and Reform for Long-Term Care. And, we're inviting people to be warriors for the people who are voiceless, and nothing that's ever been changed radically hasn't started with people, and that's what we have to do. That's our power. That's our currency.
Rick, we have a question coming in, and Beth is asking, can you speak about the legal component in this neglect and abuse? Like, what rights? Like
Mm.
Susie, did you have rights against the facility for neglect? Where does that fall within the law?
Yeah, theoretically, you do have rights. I say in theory. So, there are supposed to be enforcement agencies for in each state. It's usually the Department of Health is the licensing agency. There are ombudsman programs that are seriously underfunded and understaffed, but those are programs where both paid and volunteer ombudsmen are tasked with going in and giving voice to the residents. Unfortunately, they have limited power and there aren't enough of them and isn't enough funding. Um, you have the ability to, obviously, if you can get an attorney to represent you, you can sue the nursing home if there's serious abuse and neglect and injury that results from it. I believe that the government, both state and federal, should be doing more in terms of enforcement. The only way you're going to change corporate behavior, in my opinion, is by holding responsible corporate officers accountable. And that means criminally prosecuting them, the individual corporate executives. But the government spends too much time going after companies, okay? And the companies have limited liability, and the companies write a check and it's business as usual because the profit that's made is so much bigger than the checks they write.
So when you say
Unfortunately,
companies, are
yes.
we I mean, because I've heard a lot of private equity is going into elderly care. Is that what we're talking about, or are we talking about a whole series of people who have ownership over
You're talking about both. Okay, private equity goes into it, and they have their business model, which is make as much profit as you can, which means you cut costs. Like the biggest cost is our employees. So you cut staff. But there are also individual owners who, gather up 10 or 12 of these facilities and they use a private equity business model, even though they're not technically private equity. The business model being maximize profit by cutting staff, create related companies like a management company, a real estate owning company, a company that provides therapy, so that you can siphon out the money from the nursing home into these other supposed companies. But that person owns all of that. So you're just moving money to yourself and you're hiding the money that CMS is looking at, which is in the nursing home. Part of it, this is part of the problem. Part of the problem with the proposed regulations being rescinded is that there's no transparency about who owns all of the companies that are involved in these businesses that are related to the nursing home. And I think there have been reports that show that, and these are studies they're based on data recently that have shown that uh, more than 60% of the profits that nursing homes make are siphoned out through these related party transactions where you can't tell on the surface who's really getting the money, but it's the person or the group or the company that owns all of that makes the nursing home look poor, and they pull the money out through these secret related party transactions. It's
Susie, did
it's it's
you
yeah.
consider taking action? Or did you legal action?
Rick, can you guide me on that?
Yeah, so yeah, no, we had look, I told Susie she should try to find a lawyer because you've got, even though it's not going to be full compensation, you've got to get on record what happened, right? The problem is that for people in these facilities, and if they have dementia, the lawyers have a hard time seeing value because value is normally attached to lost wages and medical expenses. Well, no lost wages and medical expenses are all being paid for by the government. What's the value of the case? And so the conversation that Susie and I had was the value is pain and suffering. And as a filmmaker, start videotaping what's happening to your mom because that's going to show in very stark and real terms what the pain and suffering looks like. And then you take that to a lawyer um, who specializes in nursing home abuse, and that may convince that lawyer to take the case. But that's a very difficult thing to convince a lawyer that there's value in a case that involves a nursing home resident. Make
What
people can make videos, right?
Because
You
they're
can all make
capped, they're
videos.
capped also, like the kind of money that you make state by state is capped. And at the end of the day, like Rick said, the people that are responsible really are they're shielded. There's no transparency with their corporate veil. So it's the individual facilities who have insurance companies, and it becomes the cost of doing business for them, and that's factored into it. And it's really not a lot. And I mean, and even when like the whistleblower that we had on one of the big, class action suits, where that was like, several $100 million judgment, and then they file for bankruptcy and reopen under another name. So there's all kinds of tricks they do.
Yeah. Yeah, it comes through loud and clear that it's a very complicated structure, right? So I could imagine pushing the blame in one place would be a challenge.
It's
So
difficult, yeah.
what we're trying to do with the movement is to give voice to the voiceless and to collect the stories and use the media platforms that most of the public now consumes through social media and videos and movies and all that to start telling those stories and getting people engaged and getting people to understand what's happening. Because a lot of people don't, right? A lot of people don't know.
And I
I
think
don't.
there are going to be a lot of people watching this who are saying, "Oh, wow, this happened to me. What do I do?" So where do you want them to go? Tell us where you want them to go so we can give them a destination.
Oh, go to nocountryforoldpeople.com right now and go to the tab that's for Roar Movement, and sign up for the Roar Movement, and let us know what you feel how you can contribute, whether you have done this kind of work before or you're just willing to make calls, or whatever it is. And then and we are right now forming everything and hoping to be able to use this organization to actively advocate, because traditional advocacy just hasn't worked. Writing our Congress and writing letters and going to Congress and going to the steps, and with signs, just doesn't work. It doesn't. So we need to try something else.
And I'm assuming when you're talking about the lobbyists, it's not a partisan issue, is it? It's on both sides of the table.
That's
Yeah.
right. Yes.
So
Yeah.
yeah. So okay, well, thank you so much, both Rick and Susie. Thank you so much for your time. And I really encourage everybody to watch this documentary. It's 3 episodes, 3 parts. It really takes you through. It's a very heart-wrenching story, but an important one to understand really where the healthcare system is failing people with dementia, and now how to change it. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for having us. We really, really
Thank you,
appreciate
Deborah.
all the work that you're doing too, being patient.
Thank you. And if
Yeah.
you've missed any of this, don't forget to go to beingpatient.com. We will post this on our site. We'll post it on YouTube. Sign up for our newsletter. That's how we tell you what's going on. Talks like these, important ones. So thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.